My name is Evadne Hollister, though everyone calls me Eve. I'm 71 years old and have never believed myself to be dramatic. I've spent a lifetime as a listener, a literature teacher, a neighbor who remembers birthdays, a wife who never shouts. But that morning on Route 89, somewhere between Burlington and the Canadian border, I became someone else entirely. The road unrolled before us like a quiet ribbon of copper and gold. Vermont in October has a way of pretending the world is gentle. Martin was driving, his hands steady on the wheel, humming an old Simon and Garfunkel tune under his breath. A thermos of coffee sat between us, half gone, perfuming the car with its warmth. For once, there was nothing urgent to discuss, no bills, no doctor appointments, no worries about Clara, just a simple family weekend. That was the plan. Anyway, Clara had called 2 nights earlier, her voice softer than I'd heard in months. "Let's spend a few days at the lake," she'd said. "You and Dad deserve a break. Lily's been dying to see you." Her cheerfulness had sounded genuine, and I wanted so badly to believe her. When she dropped by to leave an extra overnight bag art supplies for Lily, she explained I didn't think twice. It was a small thing, really. But now, as the highway curved toward the mountains, a cold thread ran through me. It wasn't a shiver from the air conditioner or from age. It came from somewhere deeper. The kind of chill that feels like memory, like your body recognizing danger before your mind does. Martin glanced over, sensing my stillness. "You okay, Evie?" I opened my mouth to answer, but the words that came out weren't what I expected. "Martin," I said quietly, "turn the car around." He blinked, surprised but not alarmed. In 5 decades together, he's learned that my calm carries weight. Without a word, he slowed, checked the mirror, and took the next exit. We sat there on the shoulder, engine idling, the world unnaturally still. My pulse thundered. I stared at the black overnight bag resting behind my seat. I didn't know why yet, but every nerve in my body told me that something inside it did not belong. Our house sits 2 blocks from Lake Champlain, a white clapboard place with blue shutters that Martin painted himself the summer after I retired. The mornings there have a rhythm I've grown to love, coffee steaming on the porch, gulls rising over the water, the hush before the city wakes. I tend a small garden along the fence where lilies bloom each June, their pale petals bending toward the sunlight. I named them for my granddaughter, Lily, because they remind me of her fragile looking, but strong in ways no one expects. After 48 years together, Martin and I have settled into the kind of peace people earn only through decades of weathering storms. He still calls me Evie when he's feeling soft, and I still fold his reading glasses into the newspaper every morning. We built our life on moderation and trust 2 things that seem ordinary until you see how rare they've become. Our daughter, Clara, used to fill this house with noise and color. She was the child who painted on walls, who carried sketchbooks to the dinner table, who dreamed of galleries and travel. For a while, it seemed possible. She studied fine arts in Boston, married a young architect, and talked about opening a design studio of her own. But dreams can break faster than they bloom. The divorce came quietly, leaving her with debts, a child, and a kind of exhaustion I didn't recognize. So we helped. We paid the rent when she couldn't, covered Lily's school fees when she was between jobs, bought her a used car so she could take commissions outside town. Each time I said yes. It felt like love, like doing what mothers were meant to do. But sometimes, when Clara said, "That's what family's for," there was something in her tone and ease too close to expectation, a gratitude that never quite reached her eyes. Back then, I told myself it was only stress. I wanted to believe that kindness could fix anything. It started as these things always do, with small emergencies, a medical bill Clara couldn't cover, a missed rent payment after a freelance project fell through, gas money to get Lily to summer camp. Each favor came wrapped in apology and relief, followed by promises I wanted to believe just this once. Mom, I remember standing in our kitchen one spring afternoon, writing another check while Martin stirred soup behind me. He didn't raise his voice. He rarely does. You know, he said gently, you're protecting her from learning. Every time you catch her, she never has to land. She's doing her best. I answered, as I had 100 times before, she just needs a little more time. 5 years passed like that, one little more time after another. The requests became routines. Clara's calls no longer came with embarrassment, but with quiet assumption. Mom, my car insurance is due again. Can you cover Lily's field trip? Her tone carried warmth, but underneath it, I could hear the certainty that I would say yes. I told myself I didn't mind. After all, she was working hard, raising a child alone. Lily's laughter filled our weekends. Her drawings covered our refrigerator bright stick figures labeled Mommy and Grandma, their hands joined in impossible circles of pink and blue crayon. Those pictures made the checks feel like love instead of obligation. Sometimes, though, I'd notice the faintest change in Clara's eyes when she took the envelope. Gratitude blurred with something else. A flicker of entitlement. Maybe. Or exhaustion. I couldn't tell. I only knew that our roles had shifted quietly, she the one asking, I the one afraid to say no. Martin would squeeze my shoulder and say nothing more. The look in his eyes said enough he knew this path was unsustainable. But I kept walking it, believing that a mother's giving could never become too much. It was a gray Tuesday afternoon when the phone rang. I almost didn't answer, it was close to dinner, and Martin was setting the table. But the name Clara flashing across the screen still made my heart lift. Her voice began warmly enough, soft with practiced affection. Mom, I've been thinking a lot about the future, she said. Lily's getting older. I can't keep living month to month. There's an opportunity I can't miss, a small business investment with a friend from school. It'll set us up for good. I felt a ripple of pride. Then confusion. Clara had never mentioned any partner or business plan before. That sounds ambitious. Sweetheart, I said carefully. How much are you needing? She hesitated, then exhaled. 25,000. It's not a gift. It's an investment. You'll get it back once we're off the ground. The number hit me like a gust of cold air. I looked toward Martin, who was drying his hands, watching my expression tighten. That's a lot. Clara, let me think about it, I said, choosing my words slowly. Maybe we can talk it through with your dad this weekend. There was silence on the line, a silence that stretched and hardened. When she spoke again, the warmth was gone. I just thought you'd want to help me finally stand on my own, she said flatly. Forget it. The line clicked dead. For days, I replayed the conversation, searching for something I could have said differently. No messages came, no weekend visit, no calls from Lily. The house felt heavier without their laughter, the garden quieter without her small hands scattering feed for the sparrows. I began to doubt myself. Had I been petty, withholding Martin would sit beside me on the porch, the lake glinting beyond us, and murmur, "You didn't do anything wrong, Evie." She needed a limit. We both know that. But knowing didn't make it easier. Each evening, as I folded away Lily's forgotten drawings from the refrigerator door, the silence of my phone felt like punishment for the single word I'd finally learned to say no. 2 months passed before I heard my daughter's voice again. By then, I'd stopped expecting it. The silence had settled like dust, heavy but familiar. So when the phone rang one bright April morning and Clara's number appeared, I nearly dropped the dish I was rinsing. "Mom," Her tone was sunny, almost musical. "I've missed you so much. Lily has too. We've all been a little stressed lately, and I just thought, maybe it's time we spend some real time together." The words spilled out in a rush, practiced but gentle. She talked about a friend who owned a small cabin near the Canadian border, a place by a quiet lake where we could relax and reset. She said Lily wanted her grandparents there, that it would mean the world to her. I could feel the weight that had pressed on my chest for weeks lifting. "That sounds lovely," I said, trying not to let my relief show. "When were you thinking this weekend?" she replied quickly. "I'll take care of everything. You and Dad just bring yourselves." When I hung up, Martin raised an eyebrow. Out of the blue. "Huh?" "She's trying," I said, already picturing Lily's smile. Let's not question a good thing. The following evening, Clara stopped by to drop off an overnight bag. "Could you take this in your car?" she asked, handing me a black canvas duffel. "It's just Lily's art supplies, too bulky for our trunk." I took it without hesitation, touched by her easy tone. She stayed for tea, talking about work, about how proud she was of Lily's latest painting, about starting fresh. She laughed often, though her eyes didn't quite match her smile. After she left, I carried the bag to the hallway bench. The strap slid warm through my fingers, the fabric oddly firm beneath my grip. It felt heavier than it should, too heavy for paints and paper. I stood there a moment, the house quiet around me. Before brushing the thought aside, for the first time in months, my daughter had reached out. I wanted to believe it meant something good. The morning of the trip broke clear and cool, the kind of early spring day when the sky looks freshly scrubbed. Martin loaded our suitcases into the back of the SUV, while I packed a thermos of coffee and the blueberry muffins Lily loved. When Clara and Lily arrived, the air felt almost light again, like the last 2 months had been a bad dream. Lily bounded from the car, ponytail swinging, and wrapped her arms around me. "Grandma, I brought my camera. I'm going to take a picture of the lake at sunrise." Her excitement smoothed over every bruise in my heart. Clara smiled, that quick, polished smile of hers, and handed me a small cooler. "Snacks for the road," she said. She seemed relaxed, her voice steady, her gestures casual. I wanted to believe her ease was real. We decided to take 2 cars, Martin and I in ours, Clara and Lily following behind. The highway stretched ahead, framed by rolling farmland and pale green buds on the trees. The radio played something soft from the 70s, and for the first hour, everything felt normal. I caught sight of Lily in the passenger seat of their car, waving at us each time we slowed at a light. Halfway to the border, my phone rang. Clara's name appeared again. "Hey, Mom," she began, her tone bright but thin around the edges. "Just checking. Did you get that extra bag in your car? The one for Lily's art stuff?" "Yes, dear. It's right behind me." "Good, good." There was a pause, the hum of wind through her open window. Then, softly, "I love you, Mom. You know that, right?" I gripped the phone tighter. Clara hadn't said those words in years, not without reason, not with that tremor. "Of course," I whispered. But even as I said it, a cold pulse moved through me. When I ended the call, Martin glanced over. "Everything okay?" I stared at the road ahead, the mountains rising distant and blue. My throat felt dry. "Turn around," I said quietly. "Please." Martin turned the car around. Martin didn't ask why. He simply eased the car onto the next exit and followed the signs toward a rest stop tucked between pine trees and a gas station. The air outside was sharp and thin, smelling of wet asphalt and fuel. I could hear the hum of trucks idling in the distance, steady as a heartbeat. He parked near the edge of the lot, far from the others. "Do you want to tell me what this is about?" he asked softly. I didn't answer. My hands were already reaching for the back seat, for the black duffel resting there like a silent witness. The zipper caught slightly, metal teeth scraping as though the bag itself didn't want to open. Inside, folded clothes lay on top Lily's sweatshirt, a packet of colored pencils, a few sketchbooks. For a fleeting second, I thought maybe I'd imagined everything. Then I lifted the clothes. Beneath them sat neat stacks of thick envelopes bound with rubber bands, edges crisp and new, and beside them a smaller bundle wrapped in plastic. I tore it open with shaking fingers. Inside were identification cards, all with different names and the same photo. My daughter's. The air left my lungs. My knees nearly gave. I could taste copper in my mouth. The taste of disbelief. Eve Martin's voice came from somewhere far away. She was going to let me cross the border with this, I said. My own voice barely more than a breath. She packed it in our car. He looked at the open bag, then at me. The color drained from his face. "Close it," he said quietly. I folded the sweatshirt back over the contents, the fabric trembling in my hands. It felt wrong to touch it, wrong to know it had come from my child. When I met Martin's eyes, they were steady but full of something I'd never seen in him before, grief without words. "Let's go home," he said, as we drove back toward Burlington, the mountains blurred against the gray sky. The bag sat heavy behind us, and with every mile, it felt less like a possession and more like a wound neither of us knew how to carry. By the time we pulled into the driveway, dusk had gathered over Burlington, tinting the lake in bruised colors. Martin cut the engine, and for a long moment, neither of us moved. The black duffel sat on the back seat like a living thing. I could feel its presence even when I turned away. Headlights flashed behind us, Clara's car pulling in fast, gravel spitting under her tires. Lily jumped out first, confused by the tension that hung in the air. Clara followed, her face pale and tight. "Mom," she called, breathless. "Why did you turn around?" We were waiting by the highway. "What happened?" I didn't answer. I walked to the porch. The bag clutched in my hand and set it down at her feet. The zipper was already open. One movement, one small tug, and the truth lay bare between us. Clara's voice cracked. "It's not what you think." Martin stood behind me, silent as stone. I looked at my daughter, my child who had once painted the world in bright colors, and waited. She sank to her knees beside the bag, her words tumbling out. I was desperate. I owed people money, dangerous people. They threatened me. "Mom," I didn't know what else to do. Her hands shook as she tried to close the zipper, as if shutting it could undo what she'd done. I knelt beside her, close enough to smell the fear on her skin. "You used my love as cover," I said quietly. "That's not love, Clara. That's survival at someone else's cost." She broke then, her sobs sharp in the still air. Lily stood by the steps, clutching her sketchbook to her chest. Her wide eyes moved from her mother to me, confusion clouding the innocence there. I wanted to reach for her, but my hands wouldn't move. Instead, I stood and turned to Martin. "There will be no more checks," I said. "No more loans. No more rescues." Clara's crying stopped as suddenly as it had begun. She looked up at me, pleading, disbelieving, but I'd already made my choice. The days that followed moved like thick water, slow, heavy, soundless. Clara stopped calling altogether. The house, once so full of interruptions, went strangely still. I spent one afternoon closing every channel that had bound us financially, canceling the automatic transfers, freezing the emergency account, calling our lawyer to document what had happened. He listened quietly, his tone measured but kind. "You did the right thing, Mrs. Hollister," he said. "It's never easy when the person you're protecting is family." I nodded, though I wasn't sure I believed him yet. A month later, a letter arrived from a court clerk. Clara had been charged with minor fraud, given probation, and ordered to attend counseling. I read it twice before setting it aside. The paper smelled faintly of ink and disinfectant cold. Impersonal proof that what had once been family business was now a matter of law. Lily came to stay with us soon after. She arrived with a single suitcase and her sketchbook tucked under her arm. At night, she slept in the guest room, the one with the view of the lake. During the day, she followed Martin around the garden, asking about every plant he touched. Her laughter was cautious at first, as if afraid of breaking something fragile between us. One evening, while I folded laundry, she looked up from her drawing and asked, "Grandma, why did Mom do that?" I sat beside her, brushing a strand of hair from her forehead. "Because sometimes fear makes people forget who they are," I said. "But forgetting doesn't mean they're gone forever." She nodded, pressing her pencil harder into the page, turning the line into a heart. Life began to find a quieter rhythm again. We cooked simple meals, read aloud after dinner, left the porch light on later than usual. The silence no longer felt like punishment. It began to feel like rest. By summer, the garden was full again. The lilies bloomed taller than they ever had, white and clean against the sky. Lily spent her mornings sketching them from the porch, her pencil moving with quiet confidence. The house felt alive, but different, peaceful, in a way I hadn't known for years. One morning, the mail arrived with a letter in Clara's handwriting. I recognized it instantly, the careful loops, the slanted lines that had once filled birthday cards and grocery lists. For a long moment, I simply held it, the paper trembling slightly in my hands. Inside, her words were plain and unadorned. "Mom, I've finished the counseling. They said I should write to make amends, but this isn't about the court. It's about you. I'm sorry. I don't expect anything. Only that you know I understand now what I did to you and to myself." I read it twice before folding it back into the envelope. That afternoon, I drove to see her at the small apartment she'd rented near the river. She looked smaller than I remembered, her hair pulled back, her eyes tired but clear. We spoke softly about Lily, about the past, about what could and could not be rebuilt. When I left, she reached for my hand. "Can you forgive me? I already have," I said. "But forgiveness isn't forgetting, Clara. It's choosing what to carry forward." Weeks later, I donated part of my savings to a local foundation that helps seniors targeted by financial abuse. The receipt still sits in my desk drawer, a small proof that something good can grow from ruin. The black overnight bag rests in my closet now, empty and zipped. Sometimes I touch it before closing the door, reminded that love, without limits, can turn into something dangerous. Instinct saved me. Boundaries saved what was left of my heart.